Hello, my band of crew, and welcome back to the channel. Today's video, we're going to be discussing the newest release in the Crash Team Rumble digital comics. We're going to talk about the continuity of it and who these comics are even for at this point. If this is your first time coming to the channel, I release Crash Bandicoot content every weekend. We discuss lore, theories, news, we do toy reviews, game reviews, interviews, tier lists, and I have a Crash Bandicoot podcast. So if that sounds like something you might be interested in, maybe consider subscribing and joining my Crash Bandicoot family. So the newest issue of Crash Team Rumble has just been released at the time of this recording. We have no clear point in continuity where Crash Team Rumble places. Some people think that it takes place immediately after Crash Bandicoot 4. Some people think it takes place at the end of the timeline. And then there's just people that say, hey, it's a spin-off. It doesn't count towards anything. It's just filler. It doesn't take place anywhere in the timeline. I personally was of the belief that Crash Team Rumble took place at the end of the timeline because of all the things that they were introducing into the games. For example, in Capture the Flag, they could have easily had Aku Aku and Uka Uka as the representatives on the red team and the blue team. Or they could have even had a red Wumpa or a blue Wumpa. But they specifically chose Chick and Stu, who are not in Crash Bandicoot 4. People will count the epilogue, but the epilogue doesn't take place immediately after Crash Bandicoot 4. So Chick and Stu were first introduced in Crash Tag Team Racing, and here they are, despite people thinking it takes place after Crash Bandicoot 4, which can't be the case because immediately after Crash Bandicoot 4, we would have no idea who Chick or Stu even is. Now, I don't have a screenshot of the other instance, but the Entrance mode also had Entrance, who, again, he was in the epilogue, but he wasn't in the game proper. So, we have Entrance, we have Chick and Stu, and then we just have various other things that shouldn't really be known to the heroes at that point in the timeline. Like, we have Ripperoo talking about the Mojo Fuel line, stabilize the Mojo Fuel line. That was in the previous issue of the digital releases. So we've got Mojo, Chick and Stu, we've got Entrance, we have all of this post-Crash Bandicoot 4 information in Crash Team Rumble. So it's obviously after most of the events in the game. Or in the games, rather. So this should be after almost everything in the timeline. But now we've got another, issue with this newest release. So in the newest issue, we have this frame. So Ripto is discussing his last adventure. It's not hard. See a firefly? Nab it. Destroy the rest. And make sure it's painful. But how painful? Ugh. And prior to that, he says, useless Rhinox. You just can't find a good army these days. So according to the comic book, Ripto is talking about Season of Ice, which takes place after Season of Flame. If you're familiar with the Spyro series, it has a split timeline. This was before multiverses were the whole rage that everyone loved. It went Spyro 1, 2, and 3, and then it diverged. You either had the console games or you had the handheld games. And since Ripto is acknowledging a Game Boy game, as far as Crash's continuity goes now, based off this comic book, so first we have to assume that Crash Team Rumble is canon, and then we have to assume the supplemental comic book of Crash Team Rumble is also canon. But when you get there, I made a little timeline to show you. So we have Crash Bandicoot 1, 2, 3, Crash Bandicoot 4, and supposedly Crash Team Rumble happening after Crash Bandicoot 4. So parallel to the Crash Bandicoot universe, we have Spyro and the Dragon Realms. Spyro 1, 2, and 3 happen alongside Crash 1, 2, and 3. Despite the game releases not syncing up, like Spyro 1 came out when Crash 3 came out, 2 came out with CTR, and 3 came out with Crash Bash. However, now that we have this timeline and this comic stating that Ripto was just in Season of Flame, and he's coming over into Crash Team Rumble, it shows that parallel, the games sync up well. Assuming, again, Crash 4 is happening, or Crash Team Rumble is happening after Crash 4. So in this new continuity that the comic book is making, Enter the Dragonfly is no longer canon to the Crash Bandicoot version of Spyro's timeline. If that makes any sense to anyone. So now we get to the whole point of the video. Who are these comics even for at this point? They're not for the fans that want this to happen at the end of the timeline. They're also not for the fans that want it to be a spin-off, because they're referencing continuity. And now, they can't even keep straight the canon of either franchise. Because if this game is supposed to be happening where it is, Cortex doesn't even know who Ripto is. Whoever he is, that moron will soon face our collective wrath. Dipto must be stopped. To be continued. So Cortex teams up with Ripto in Spyro Orange and Crash Purple. But this is stating that Cortex doesn't know who Ripto is. So now, instead of... I keep repeating myself, and I'm sorry. But instead of the games being at the... Crash Team Rumble being at the end of the timeline like it was supposed to be, it's now been pushed to the ending of Crash Bandicoot 4... because Cortex doesn't know who Ripto is. But it conflicts with what we see in the game, because we have Chicken Stew, the Mojo, everything that I mentioned earlier in the video. So, the comics and the games are sending conflicting messages, and I don't even know who to blame at this point. Who's writing the comics? Who's illustrating the comics? Like... are they communicating with one another at all? Or do they not even know the continuity of the series at this point? It's just a big mess. I hope when the next issue comes out, things are addressed. Like maybe if we send them messages or they actually see this video, with chances are Toys for Bob probably is not looking on YouTube at reviews for their comic books. But it would be nice if we had some cohesion with all of this. The comics don't really reflect what's going on in the games, and then the game doesn't really reflect what's going on in the overall timeline. I think the only way that this could be rectified is that at the end of this issue of comics, that Ripto does some sort of mind eraser spell, and he purges the memory of him from all the doctors' heads, and then he vanishes off back into wherever he wants to go. That way, when he does show up further down in the timeline, Cortex won't know who he is, and continuity will somewhat be corrected. So everyone, I hope you enjoyed the video, and we will see you next week for a brand new Crash Bandicoot video. Take care. Have a great night.